Greetings, Wilkinson here. Today my guest is Barbara Kerr. And Barbara and I met, we were just talking about it, at the Bent Theater. She was one of the actors in Gross Indecency, and she was amazing. And we kind of hit it off. She's a great gal. Say hi to my peeps.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you. And we should add that Gross Indecency, the 3 trials of Oscar Wilde, was neither gross nor indecent. It was a wonderful experience on stage and off. It was my first opportunity to act with the Bent. I've since done one more show, and I'm looking forward to many more.
Yay. I saw you in your last one. That was good, too. I was away on the East Coast, so I wasn't stage manager.
It was a fabulous time. A character that I loved playing, that I miss already. And a lot of us in the ensemble for It's Only a Play by the brilliant Terrence McNally said, there are some shows you do and it has a lifespan, and when it's done, you think that was wonderful, but it's time to move on. I could have done that one indecently.
Not
usually. I could have done that one indefinitely because it was so much fun on stage and off.
It was fun to watch, too. Anyway, Barbara, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I often joke, baby's first words, let's move. But I do mean that as a joke. I have visited the city since. There's so many wonderful places. It's very vibrant and wonderful. But when I was 3, my family moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That is my hometown. I grew up there. My sister still lives there. My cousins live there. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I still love visiting it, and I still root for the Pittsburgh Steelers during football season.
Cool. So there must be more to your story than that, though.
Well, let's see. I can go back. I was always a very good student, and I remember in the first grade at Manila Avenue School, they used to have what we called a May pageant. Every class would put on a song or a number.
Did they have a maypole?
No. This was, you would go on the stage, and each class would have a vignette. In first grade, we were a wedding vignette. I was a bridesmaid. I was not the bride, but something about that experience stayed with me. I was in it every year. By 6th grade, we began doing full-scale musicals for school, always musicals, and I was always cast, even though I was taller than most of the other students. But I like to say I was cast because I may not have been good, but I was loud. You could hear me in the back. I was a loud singer. I did eclectic roles. I was the Duchess in a musical version of Alice in Wonderland, and I was actually the ghost of Jacob Marley in a musical version of A Christmas Carol.
Really?
And I remember it because I was very disappointed. The teacher had told me that if no boys auditioned, I could be Scrooge, and my heart was set on being Scrooge. Well, one boy auditioned, so he got the part. So I wound up being the ghost of Jacob Marley. I was dressed all in black, and I had white powder on my face, and I got my dad's tire chains, and I clanked on, sang one song, and clanked off, and then watched from the wings as the other young man played my part, the role of Scrooge. And then, in high school, we moved to a different part of Pittsburgh, and I think by sophomore year, I was getting small parts. During my junior year, we did an older play called Rally Round the Flag Boys, and I was named Best Actress at Upper St. Clair High School. Did leads in my senior year, including played Mrs. McAfee in Bye Bye Birdie. And suddenly it was time to think about college, and I thought, well, I'm going to major in theater. I had decided I really wanted to attend Ithaca College, upstate New York, an area you know very well, beautiful, cold and snowy. And so I decided I was going to audition for a drama scholarship. My dad flew up with me. I'd never flown before. And I'm here to tell you, it was probably the worst audition Ithaca College has ever seen. I chose bad material, and I did it justice. I did it badly, and I just choked. And I got home. I thought, well, if I can't even do an audition for a scholarship at college, I better rethink this. So I started looking at what Ithaca was offering. And I'd always been fascinated by television news. When I grew up in Pittsburgh, there was a woman on the air whose name was Marie Torrey, and she was a pioneer. She was an anchor and an interviewer, and she was wonderful. So it never occurred to me that that wasn't a path that women pursued. It wasn't until years later that I realized how extraordinary that was at that time. So I looked at Ithaca's offerings, and I thought, well, television radio, I find that fascinating. So I looked at that. Well, I could do that, and then I could minor in theater because all the TV courses, you had to be a television radio major. theater was open to everyone. So that's how I ultimately got to Ithaca College, at which point the path became a little bit different than I might have thought.
So all of that gave you the taste for theater, though?
Always. And at Ithaca College, there's the Performing Arts Building had, at the time, the TV and radio studios were on the ground level and the theater was upstairs. And I really did start working just in the TV radio department, doing radio newscasts, doing TV, learning all about it. And then one day someone said, well, you know, the sophomore students are getting ready to direct and they need actors for those productions. So I was encouraged to audition for a one-act called Mrs. Dally Has a Lover. I got cast, and it was almost a seamless experience. And after that, everybody started asking me, well, would you audition for this? Would you do that? And I wound up spending less and less time down in the television radio department and more upstairs in the drama department, so that by my senior year especially, I was Jean Brodie in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I was Joanne and Company for the first of 4 times in my life, and I was cast as Smitty in a production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which also was a USO tour. We went to Greenland and Newfoundland and Labrador. And 2 of those shows, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and How to Succeed in Business, featured another student named Robert Johansson. Remember that name because it's going to come up again later.
It will, huh?
Mm-hmm. I promise.
But you went into broadcasting, right?
I did go into broadcasting. I actually went to New York for a couple of years first. I wanted life experience. I had lived a lovely life in Pittsburgh, but I felt somewhat sheltered. So a roommate and I went first to New York for a year, and then I lived for a year on my own. Looking back, I probably did more theater than a lot of my friends and colleagues did, but I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I didn't know anyone, and I didn't know how do you get a good headshot? How do you get a resume? I had nobody to really support me. So one night, a friend and I went to the Strasberg Institute, and Alan Alda was the guest speaker. And he gave a fabulous presentation, and toward the end, he was taking questions, and someone said, how do you know when you should absolutely pursue a career in theater? And he thought for a second. He said, it's a great question. He said, honestly, if there is something else that you like to do, love to do that to make a living, and do theater for pure joy. And I remember thinking, you know, there is something that I like to do, and that took me back to TV radio. So with not much more than a headshot, I wound up applying for a job and was hired in Hagerstown, Maryland, a very tiny TV station. Back in the day when we were still on film, those of us who were in film actually know why B-roll is called B-roll, because there really were 2 film chains, an A-roll, an A chain and a B chain, and you dissolved that one to show other things. Did that for about 2 years. Then my dad passed away, was looking for some change, got hired in Dayton, Ohio, as a reporter at first, and then ultimately as an anchor. And 2 things about that. I started at a TV station which was a competing station to the station where my now husband was working. I wound up working at his station, and the rest, as they say, was history. That was how we met, at a fundraiser for Children's Medical Center, where Debbie Reynolds was the guest star, and we struck up a conversation, and we became friends first. We were friends for a very long time before we got married, and that impacted my career path as much as a point at which, like many women in television, there's a point in your career where you think, either I'm going to do this forever if I'm able to, or you think, you know, there are other things I'd like to do. And that was me. My husband continued in television news, which took us around the country. I made a decision to go into organizational communications, and I'm happy to talk about all of the places we've lived and all of the different kinds of jobs that I held.
Hit the highlights. What are they?
I sure will. When we left, my husband was offered a job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And this was at the point where I thought, I really don't want to do this anymore. So back in the day, we actually used to look in the newspaper to find job listings.
Right.
So one day I was looking through the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, which would get to the bookstore in Dayton probably on Thursday, the Sunday paper. And there was an ad for a public affairs officer for the Internal Revenue Service. And I always say my first response was to laugh uproariously, thinking, what kind of masochist wants to do PR for the IRS? And then I thought about it, and I thought I might be an intriguing candidate. First of all, I was a woman, and they didn't have a lot in government at that time. I thought that my experience in media might be valuable, so I sent in a resume. I heard back. I wound up flying into Milwaukee on my own dime for an interview. I heard later there were 72 initial applicants. They interviewed 8 of us. And I was incredibly relaxed because I wasn't sure that I wanted the job, but I got it. And it was a perfect place for me to work because a lot of the emphasis at that time was on media relations. I knew how to do that. I was blessed to have several wonderful gentlemen leading the organization, which when I started, we were responsible for communications in Wisconsin. There was a reorganization, and then it became Iowa and Nebraska as well. And they were so supportive. I learned a lot, and they encouraged me to take chances and try new things. The one for which I am probably most remembered came early in my time. Well, 2. Not long after I took the job, the office moved just down one main street in Milwaukee. But I managed to get some information together about what it took to do that. We were in the newspaper. We were on every TV station. It was a great way for me to meet the media. But not long after that, I was talking to a friend as I was leaving her offices one night. I said, I would really love to do something special on April 15th, but I want it to be a genuine service. I'd like it to be fun, and I'd like it to go out to where people are, but where on earth are people going to be on April 15th? And my friend said, well, actually, Barbara, this year that's easy. That you're going to be out at, at Milwaukee County Stadium because it's opening day for the Milwaukee Brewers. I stopped dead in my tracks. I said, excuse me? They said, yeah, it's opening day for the Brewers. Thank you. The next day, I immediately called the Milwaukee Brewers. Hi, my name is Barbara Kerr. I'm with the IRS. We would love to come out on opening day to collect tax returns. There was a long silence. Well, it's okay with us if it's okay with the stadium. Thank you. That's all I need. Called the stadium. Same conversation. It's fine with us. We borrowed a bus from the VA Medical Center. All of the members of our leadership team donated money so I could buy payday candy bars to give to people. We had a 1040 tailgate. Made national news. Had a great time. People thanked us for coming. And that set a standard for other events that took place around the country. The editorial cartoonist for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel did a cartoon about it, and I liked it so much that I actually asked him to send me a copy. So that's probably what I'm best known for. But we did a lot of creative things. We would travel the state with...
back up. But that's back in the day when everybody sent in paper copies.
Absolutely. Yeah. When people sent it, before we did electronic filing.
Right.
And you didn't need a stamp. You could just bring it to us.
So you advertise that they would bring them ahead of time, right?
Absolutely, because we did not fill them out.
Right.
They had to be completed, but the district director said later it was the first time he heard people say thank you to the IRS. Also that he saw somebody with a tax return in one hand and a beer in the other. It was just a great experience.
Wow.
And I always really believed that the service portion of that name, Internal Revenue Service, that was always my focus. And I know that there are people who hear this story and think, oh, the IRS, those people. To me, it's like any other organization. There may be a handful of people who do not do things the way you or I would, but most of them were incredibly nice, hardworking people working as hard as they could at an incredibly difficult job and an unpopular one. And so I was privileged. It was, I learned so much. And after we were there for, 7 or 8 years, there were some changes at the TV station where my husband was working. He had been...
Now, was he working in Milwaukee at a TV?
He was.
So you were both working in town.
We were. He had actually taken a job at Milwaukee Public Television. He had a show called Smith & Company, and I should explain that my husband's name is Joe Smith. If you live in the Coachella Valley, you may know him as a morning anchor on NBC Palm Springs for several years. He's worked many other places. There, he anchored a show called Smith & Company. He was looking for another broadcasting job at the time, and one of the places he had applied was the public TV station in Las Vegas. On a day when I flew out to San Francisco to have my interview, I got back to the house, and my husband said, your boss called, he wants to talk to you. He said, what does that mean? I said, well, it probably means I got the job. On the same day that I was offered the job in San Francisco, my husband was offered the job at Las Vegas Public Television. And he looked at me and he said, what should we do? And I said, well, what are the odds of this happening at all, let alone on the same day? I think we're supposed to do both for a little while. So he got an apartment in Las Vegas. I got an apartment in Pacifica outside of San Francisco. And for 2 years, we did that. We commuted back and forth as often as we could. We both loved living where we were. The only downside was that we weren't together. So after about 2 years, we started talking we need to be in the same place. He was offered an opportunity to work at an organization called Florida's News Channel. The theory was this was going to be CNN for Florida. It was going to be based out of Tallahassee. So I said, okay, you go ahead, we'll go there, and I will find something. I knew I couldn't stay with government. So I get to Tallahassee, and I start looking through papers, and I applied here, and then I saw a job for a public relations company, and I thought, well, I've never done a PR company. That could be interesting. So I sent in my resume, got a call back within about an hour because my resume was very unusual for Tallahassee. Wound up being hired. It was a company with headquarters in Vero Beach, also an office in Washington, D.C., and they did national clients. So I started as their communications director in Tallahassee, and then through a circuitous route, I actually wound up being director of communications for everywhere. So I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. I traveled a lot nationally, learned a lot. It probably was my least favorite public relations job only because of the time you have to spend looking for new work. I would rather be doing the work than looking for that. But we were there for about 2 years, and then we were ready for a change again, and my husband was offered a chance to work at KGW Television, the NBC affiliate in Portland. Actually, he was working for the Portland Business Journal, but on air for KGW. So I said, well, I'm ready. So we moved out, and I was again looking through a newspaper, and I saw that there was an opening for it was a director of publications and media relations for the Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon. And I sent in my resume because I knew a little bit about it. My husband's sister is a sister in another community. And I thought, again, maybe I could be helpful. I have some experience that might be useful. So I sent in the resume, got a call about an hour later. Can you come? I said, well, I all I have is a scrapbook. I could bring that. Come. So we had an interview. They loved it. On my way back, I went back to Tallahassee to move up, got out to Portland, interviewed again, and we were talking, and they said, you have questions for us? And because, again, I wasn't convinced that this is what I was supposed to do next. I felt I could be honest. They were wonderful people. I said, well, I must tell you, I find the title of your position odd. Do you really want to tell the news media that your publications are more important to you than they are? You haven't even talked about internal communications or websites. I think what you want is a director of communications. And I saw everybody scribbling notes.
Oh, wait, what were they calling it again?
They were calling it the director of publications and media relations. And it just did not seem to encompass the message that they wanted to send about what the organization was doing. So I recommended director of communications. They adopted that. And I came in that role working in their foundation. I was there for about 4 years, lovely women. But after about 4 years, I was ready for something else. If you look at my overall resume, you'll see markers at about 5 years in. 4 to 5 years, I start getting time for something else, and I saw that a job had opened up for a director of media relations at Clark College, a 2-year community and technical college in Vancouver, Washington, right across the river from Portland. And I again thought, well, I haven't done that. That could be interesting. So I said in my resume, I heard later same things. They had like 70 applicants. They interviewed about 8 of us, and I wound up doing that. I brought in as director of media relations, and again, a circuitous route. I wound up being responsible for all of communications. I was there for about 8 years. This is so important. I do a lot of mentoring of college students and younger PR professionals, or those who are newer in the profession. And I sometimes joke, you will not believe me now, but trust me, years from now, when you look back on your career and your life, the things that will just kill you are the ones you didn't try because, well, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the support, I don't know how. Try. You will never regret saying yes. Maybe it won't work out the way you thought, but you'll learn something. You'll learn something through everything. So The power of saying yes, and all of these jobs you've heard me talk about happened because I thought, well, I haven't really done that before. So I said yes to the opportunities, and I haven't even talked about all the theater that I've done all along the way.
So you mentioned that you like switching jobs or you get antsy every 5 years. How long have you been married to Joe?
I've been married to Joe for 32 years.
So what went wrong?
Well, we sometimes joke, neither of us can leave because we know too much about each other. Somebody will say something, chapter 49 when Joe said, chapter 32 when Barbara said. I feel very blessed. He really is my best friend. There's nobody I'd rather talk to. He's the first person I want to see in the morning and the last person I want to see at night. And
oh, wait, so you still like each other?
we do still like, we not only love each other, we like each other.
That's good.
We can make each other laugh like no one else. Joe is the person who, at the end of every play that I'm in, good, bad, or indifferent, I know what he's going to say. He's going to look at me and say, what you did on that stage. And the reason that's funny, several years ago, we were seeing a play, and it was terrible. And our friend was terrible. And we were going madly during intermission. What can we say? What can we say? So we went all through all of these phrases. That was the one that stuck. So that's how it was embedded.
Just what you did on that stage.
What you did on that stage. I think some of the honorable mentions were, you must be exhausted.
Because I am.
You've never been better. That's another one. And then we came up with one not long ago. It was so ambitious. So if we say any of those things to you, it's a dual-edged sword. Could be great, maybe not. But he stayed in TV news, and when we moved here, we came here in 2018. We were both really ready for a physical change. When we left Milwaukee, we lived for about 10 years. We both said, if I never see another snowflake again. We loved it, but so cold and wintry. Loved Portland, but we both said, if I never see another raindrop again. We actually talked about San Francisco and we talked about Vegas, but we both admitted that we were remembering them from the time we lived there, not necessarily as they are now. But we'd been here in Palm Springs several times and absolutely loved it. So we set one week. We came on a house hunting trip. First day out house hunting, second house we saw, we fell in love with and bought it.
As a former realtor, we love that.
Absolutely fell in love. Well, I also think, too, there are people, as you know, from realtor, there are people who can only see a place as it is. Joe and I have frequently looked back at pictures of houses we've bought and moved into and going, I don't remember it looking like that. Do you? We could see how it would be. And that's invaluable because we like to think we've enhanced. We're all caretakers. We've enhanced almost every place that we've lived. So we've had great adventures doing that too. But when we came here, I really made a decision to retire from public relations, and I really did. Joe had made the decision. I mean, you can't see me at home, but I'm using air quotes around the word retire from television news. But it's always been his hobby as well as his job. At age 14, he walked up a hill in Springfield, Massachusetts to learn more about a station, wound up volunteering, and has done it ever since. So he reached out to NBC Palm Springs here, where he knew one person, I should also say, everywhere we've moved, we didn't know anybody. Here, he knew one person, but he reached out to that person, and he finally wound up volunteering, just coaching and mentoring people at NBC Palm Springs. And then one day, the former news director said, well, do you want to cover this story? Okay, fine. And well, do you want to do a stand-up? Okay, fine. And finally said, look, we're looking to re-energize and reinvent the morning newscast. What do you think? So he wound up doing that. And that piece allowed us to meet so many people here and do so many things. It really made our lives in the Coachella Valley possible. The other things that happened, as usually is true with me, was after a time, I got involved in theater. Now, you remember the name Robert Johansson I mentioned some time ago. Now, I will say every place I've lived around the way, I've done theater everywhere. I have been such a lucky girl. But the last theater I'd done in Portland was the Sisters Rosenzweig at Profile Theater. Might have been 2013. I'd have to look at the date. I had not done anything when I got here. I didn't know anybody in 2018. 2019 rolled around and I couldn't even find auditions. I missed them and all of that. So COVID hits. And in the middle of COVID, on Facebook, somehow Robert Johansson and I realized that we were both in Palm Springs. We had not connected since we left Ithaca College decades before, but he comes here now during the season, half year. I was here, and early in 2022, we were talking. Stephen Sondheim had passed away. Robert had actually worked with him on a production of Sweeney Todd in New York, and we thought, wouldn't it be lovely to do an evening to honor Mr. Sondheim? And Robert rented Coachella Valley stage for one night. We didn't even charge for tickets. We just invited friends and said, come in, let's celebrate this man we loved. A wonderful accompanist named Kurt Jordan, who plays for all of the major groups in town, was the pianist, and we did an evening of Stephen Sondheim. So that was my first piece here. Then, a year later, Robert really wanted to do an evening dedicated to Sir Noel Coward, so we brought in 2 other wonderful actors, a gentleman named Wayne Bryan, who's being seen increasingly in this region now, also impeccable credits from Broadway to Wichita, where he was managing artistic director. Robert, I should have said, was the artistic director for several decades at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey. It's the State Theater of that. His credits are, his productions were on great performances on PBS, so he's done all of this. So it was a joy to reconnect. And we did our Noel Coward, and a couple months later, I heard that the organized theaters were going to have unified auditions.
Right.
So I thought, I said, I've not really done this in a long time, but I'm going to sign up. If I'm lucky.
Is that the one that we just did this
year?
It
was held at CV Rep back in June. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was there. Okay. Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is a unique opportunity to be seen by everyone. So I had a piece put together, and then I talked to my friend Wayne Bryan. He told me what he was going to do for an audition. He had something very clever, and I thought, okay, so I actually put together 4 little vignettes, a monologue that led into a song, that led into a monologue, that led into a song. You only had 5 minutes, and you got as far as you got, but they were really beautifully run. The people were so kind, all of the volunteers, and when you were done, you would go to the lobby, and people would say, wait a few minutes, if a company would like to see you for a role, callbacks.
Right.
And I got several, one of which was The Bent, which was still figuring out their season. And I wound up being offered 3. I wound up being offered the opportunity to be part of the ensemble in Gross Indecency. I wound up being part of a wonderful cast in It's Only a Play. And looking to the future in the 2023-2024 season, I will be part of a production of Sherlock Holmes Confidential for Desert Ensemble Theater. And in the middle of all that, the Museum of Ancient Wonders was trying to elevate its presence. They're also trying to raise funds to create an LGBTQ museum in the region. And they asked if I would do a reading of a one-woman play about Alice B. Toklas. So all of that has been happening. And then I talked about going 180 back. A friend encouraged me to do some volunteer freelance writing for the Desert Sun. If you read the Desert Scene section talking about special events, you'll see that a number of us contribute. And I was talking to the editor of that section one day, and I said, when I go onto theatrical websites in our region, I notice a lot of quotes from Broadway.com, different things, but nothing from the Desert Sun. And he was very candid. He said, we have a very small staff. We cannot get to everything, so we tend to do calendar items only. And I said, well, that's too bad. It seems to me that even if you did one significant story about each of the significant theatrical companies in the region, they would know that you care about what they're doing, that you value the way in which they contribute to the region artistically, economically. And he said, you should talk to the features editor. So I did. She happens to love theater, so we started that in the 2022-23 season, and it really was a joy to be able to showcase people so appreciative of knowing that their local media outlet, the Desert Sun, values what they do. And I'm really pleased to be continuing that this year. It's let me meet wonderful people again. So I've been doing that. I've written for some other organizations, including DAP Health. So in a way, after making that big curve to public relations and the public relations side of America, I've now gone back again, doing theater, writing, journalism, and I didn't even talk about opportunities that I had to do some work overseas in places like Bulgaria and Hong Kong and the Philippines. I am a very lucky girl.
So we come to the point where I ask the person sitting over there, what are the main things you've learned in your life? You mentioned one of them. Say yes. What else?
I joked about before, I will not say which place it was, although you can probably guess because I went it quickly, but don't agree to move to a place that you haven't visited at least once. Some places, I know instantly if a place is going to feel like home. You can go to a wonderful place, but does it feel like home? And if it doesn't feel like that, you're probably not going to be there very long. You don't have to know a lot of people or anyone if you move to a new place. As I mentioned, we didn't know anybody when we moved to all of these different places except one, and we have made friends that have lasted a lifetime. I think that's really excellent advice. And find something that you love. If you're lucky enough to do it for a career, wonderful. If it winds up being your outside passion and hobby, wonderful as well. Find your community, because that I really believe is key. Whether you're living in a place for a number of years or someplace new, theater is always how I have found my community, my friends. And the same was true ultimately for some organizations like PRSA. I think that's really good advice as well. And just be open to opportunities and open to saying yes.
Say yes. I told you that's a movie I like.
I know it. As soon as you said that, I thought, boy, we are connected on this today.
There you go. Well, thank you for coming in, Barbara.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and what a treat it was to work with you on Gross Indecency. I so hope we get to do that again. You are so gifted. You're so kind. You were so extraordinary, juggling the schedules of all of us in a very complex play. I hope people at home got a chance to see it, but if you didn't, he's amazing. He's going to be doing more. If you get a chance to see a show that Wilkinson works on, go see it.
Wow. Thanks for the pitch.
My pleasure.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.